I'm Adam Sloan.
I'm Paxton Charles.
And I'm Turner Brown, and our topic is the ongoing debate about whether college athletes should be paid or not. And we're ready for questions.
Has your thoughts on the process changed since doing the research?
Yeah, at first I was against paying them because technically they're being paid through scholarships. But then basically the NCAA is making like billions of dollars off of the athletes, and they're not really getting anything back. But and the fact that athletes are like putting their lives on the line through football and other sports, risking injury. So yeah, my opinion's changed.
Anybody else?
I'm the opposite, actually. Like, I was all for it before, and now, like, looking into it, I feel like it's too hard to, like, compensate, like, everybody, like, at every school, because, I mean, one school is going to make a lot of money, more money than another, and, like, to divide that revenue, I think would be way too hard and would stir up way too much controversy between, like, men's sports, women's sports, like, everything. So I don't think it's worth it. I think they should just keep it as it is and have their scholarships and make money when they can later in life.
I thought pretty much it's the same thing as he did, just because like I saw somewhere where even though they make like millions of dollars off like TV broadcasting, all that kind of stuff, the NCAA has a lot of like expenses that take probably almost 90% of the revenue that they make or whatever. So it'd just be hard to pay for that cost to pay these college athletes.
One of the things that concerns me about paying college athletes is, one, they're student first, athlete second. But anything that happens in athletics tends to spill over into other extracurricular activities. So can you see where if they started paying their best athletes, that they would start paying their best marching band member or whoever you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It would spill over into all those areas. So, you know, how would they guard against that? How would they be able to argue not to do that, Adam?
Yeah, that's one of the things why it'd be difficult to pay them, is because you wouldn't know exactly how much to pay each individual. And I mean, if they came up with like a way to do it, then it'd be great. But another thing is like, I think it should stay with the NCAA, because and like band obviously isn't part of the NCAA. So I don't know, if they figure out a way to do it that's like logical, then I think it'd be great. But yeah, that's one of the reasons so many people are against it.
You all have already hit on the biggest topic, which is how do you pay it, because it's easy to talk about the kids who are filling bowls of 100,000 people coming and TV contracts and all that. With the kids at the smaller schools that may still be Division I, and it's the cross-country team member who's working as hard as everybody else, but maybe doesn't drive the same revenue, because this discussion is really about capitalism and getting paid your value. Each sport, if you just look at the sports that really drives this discussion, football, high-end men's basketball, and baseball, they really treat this subject differently. Did you all look at that, the relationships to those professional sports? Football players don't have the same abilities as basketball players, which is the same as just to say that the one and dones and those kinds of things in basketball, which is different than baseball. Did you all look at that at all, as far as what access players have in different sports?
Yeah, isn't it?
Are you saying like how many years they have until they can go pro? Or
Correct. You know, in baseball,
baseball can go immediately, or if they go to college, they have to stay for, I think, 3 years, and then football is after 3 years, and then basketball is you have to go to college at least 1 year.
Right. Did you, and what are your thoughts on whether that could be a solution to some of these issues? Because, for instance, those are not rules, NCAA rules. those rules are the professional sports rules. So the one and done rule is not an NCAA rule.
Yeah.
The baseball rule is not an NCAA rule. Now you're really in trouble. At least two of you. Do you think that helps solve it? Are there changes to that that could be made that would help your, I think two of you had one view and you had a different view now after you've gone through this. Are there any things that you think the NCAA could work with professional sports and kind of help solve this problem another way?
I think that if like we were to pay college athletes, there'd obviously have to be like contracts and stuff in order, because you can't give like a kid like Carl Anthony Towns or something who's gonna stay for 1 year and go to the NBA. You can't like just put a lot of money on him, because that'd be just like throwing it out the door or whatever. You'd have to say like, you have to stay like 2 years in school or all 4 years in order to get this like money or whatever. Because in the long run, if he leaves after a year, it's not really helping out the school. It's just giving him money to get more money from the NBA.
That's, the debate's been ongoing since I was a high school senior, I just wrote a paper on this.
I
And
thought you were
At
gonna,
the-
you were wanting to get paid.
No, I was not in that category. But the argument always comes down to, if you were to pay athletes, how much would you pay them? What is it based on? Because back in that day, it was, hey, they did get a scholarship, but at the same time, they're unable to work, their time commitment eliminates the opportunity for any type of jobs. So how would you set a pay scale for an athlete in college?
I saw one thing. It was someone who was like hired to try and figure that out, and they said they had like multiple ways. One of the ways was like through a trust fund, and they pay athletes. I think it was like $5,000. Most of like the scholarship athletes, that'd be like the maximum they'd pay them. So it's not like a huge amount of money or anything. And then the other way was just like without a trust fund. So that was just like two of the ways that someone came up with.
But speaking to the $5,000, what did they base that on? How did they come to that number of?
I don't know how they came up with that number exactly.
Have any of you all thought through what would you pay them if you, in the ideal world, if you just had, if you just had a sum of money, whether it's a trust fund, and you could divvy it out however you want, how would you go about paying them? And set that price?
I think, like, personally, like, I mean, realistically, I think whoever makes the most money for the school should get the most money. So I think that's how they should do the pay cuts, just like take that percentage and divvy it out to those players. But I mean, honestly, you can't do that nowadays, because somebody's gonna call controversy, somebody's gonna probably take it to court, and it's just too hard. So I don't think there's a real logical way to divvy out money unless you just do a set price for everybody, which would honestly not be worth it. Like you said, you could give $5,000 to Anthony Davis a couple years ago, but also give $5,000 to the cross country player that doesn't make any money for UK. So it's just, I think it's too hard to weigh out.
Adam, I think you said you, through this process, changed from feeling like they shouldn't get paid to.
Yeah, but I'm still like pretty much neutral on it. But I mean, it leaned me more towards.
Yeah, and so let's, yeah, obviously this is a big debate, so I don't know that there's a right or wrong. It's more of an opinion than an informed opinion. Would you, let's say for a second you feel that way. Do you feel like that's where it ends? Do you feel like they ought to be allowed to do endorsements, for instance? Should they be allowed to, under some controlled area, be allowed to use their likeness, because they're currently not allowed to use their likeness, their name, anything to generate revenue for themselves until they are no longer, or they jeopardize their amateur status. Do you think that ought to be a part of this, or do you think?
Yeah, I think they should definitely be able to do endorsements. And there's something on Kentucky Sports Radio last night. There's an article that Turner sent me. It was the Big East commissioner. He said that in like 2 years, he thinks that like big time players like Leonard Fournette, Derrick Henry, and like big basketball players and everyone like that, he said that they'll probably be able to do endorsements and make money through that in the next couple of years.
How do you eliminate the jealousy factor? For example, I just know when I was at UK, some of the best athletes on campus were gymnasts. I mean, and they're putting their life on the line every day that they go to practice, more so than the football player, really. I mean, they could have a catastrophic injury just like that. I don't see a lot of endorsement money coming to them, but at the same time, they live up to everything that a student athlete's supposed to be. I mean, they typically were A, B students, most of them straight A students, and yet they were just super diligent. But, how would you sit there if you're a football player and say, I deserve more money?
See, that's another thing I totally agree with, like paying, because like you could have that swimmer or gymnast that literally practices more in a week than a football player, and they're not going to make any money compared to that player. Like, I feel like paying like the football player and not paying the gymnast literally takes away from like the love of the game or like passion for the game, because if that gymnast goes into practice every day just thinking, why am I here? I'm not going to make any money compared to that basketball player who just practices like 4 hours a day compared to my 6 hours a day. What's the point anymore? Like, why do I even try? So I think paying just takes away from the love of the game and just kind of ruins college sports in general.
Let's say that you do pay college athletes, or that it does come down to pay. And I hear your point on the, it sounds bad coming from the jerk football coach, but Carl Anthony Towns you bring up is a good point. I mean, think about how much endorsement money he could have had, how much money he generated, not necessarily him, but we're getting down to the individual here, that group of kids generated for UK because they were so good. You know, the rifle team's national champs at UK too. So how could you see a tier coming where football and basketball are the only revenue generating sports? Everybody else is an expense for colleges most times. Is there ever a case where it's not?
There's a few.
So, you know, the football kid in the same breath can say, well, you know, you're a gymnast, you're not making any money for our school. You know, you don't play in front of 100,000 fans, 80,000 fans. You know, could you find a fair way, or did you come across anything that was fair to say we're going to pay revenue generating sports this versus non-revenue generating sports that, and obviously it would be less money? Do you think we could ever get there?
I mean, I think that if it wouldn't come down to like just paying the athletes, like when you said the endorsements and all that kind of stuff, like if you're skilled enough to have an endorsement and all that, like, cause all the big time players and stuff, they can all get their endorsements, whether it's like a little small endorsement or a big one. So like, if it was okay to do that or whatever, I think that would be like a solution to be able to do that, because like that's not the school like discriminating against other sports. That's just like companies wanting the best athletes and the best like. Because I mean, if you have like the rifle team or whatever, they're not gonna get a big endorsement from Nike or something like that. It's if you get like Carl Towns or Anthony Davis or something, just like when Anthony Davis was here and they put his eyebrow on the t-shirts, that almost caused problems because they thought that like he was gonna try to like receive money for that. And so I think that if something becomes that popular or a player becomes that popular, it should be okay for him to like accept stuff that has to do with like him, because he's the one who created that.
Well, I want to go back to one of the questions I asked earlier, and I don't know that I asked it in the best way. But right now, I'll just give you my personal belief is that baseball has the best system to be fair to a student athlete, but also be fair to the university and what it means, as Coach Galloway said, to being a true student athlete. And that is, you can go professional right out of high school, and that's fine. And if you've got to choose, and actually they give the young person the opportunity to know how much money they would be making and all that when they make that decision. It's a little tough on college baseball coaches, but if you, baseball likes that for the top tier players. When I say baseball, Major League Baseball. The NFL and the NBA do not like the thought of a young person being able to come. In football, it's more of a health issue. Your body has to mature and grow. But in basketball, they don't, right now, the colleges are paying for their scouting services. They don't have a minor league system to the same degree that Major League Baseball is. If you took that for a second, does that
Yeah.
make sense? Then how, for instance, on basketball, on big-time men's basketball, do you then convince the NBA to change their one-and-done rule? Because if you believe that it's hurting college basketball, and it's making it tough on colleges to balance the fact that they need to be students with the fact that there's this perception out there that if you're one and done, you're not a student, and it's just kind of a sham, so to speak, in some people's minds. How, have you given any thought to how you would try to convince, if you were sitting across the table from the commissioner of the NBA, and you're the NCAA, and you want them to take kids out of high school if they have that ability, and if not, we want to go to the baseball model, say, where they need to stay at least 3 years. Have you given any thought to how you would talk to the NBA about changing that, why they should change that rule?
I think I've always thought that you should stay 2 years for basketball. Like you shouldn't be able to go straight to the NBA at all. I think one's not enough, especially like developing wise. Like look at Scal this year. Like Scal's going to the NBA this year. You have no idea if he's going to be like as good as he could be. You just don't know. I feel like 2 years would give them enough like scouting, would give them enough would give the players enough time to like improve and like show their true worth. And also it doesn't like load the NBA, because like the NBA obviously doesn't have a farm system like the Major League Baseball teams do. They don't have 3 different divisions under the MLB that players can go to and like develop. All they have is a D League, and that's still not enough like room for like all these new players coming in like every year. I feel like, and there's always those players that just get washed right out because they leave. Like Duran Lamb, he left way too early, and now he's playing like in Panama or something right now, when he could have stayed at UK, gotten better, and maybe still be in the NBA now. So I feel like they should stay longer in college just to like realize their full potential before they just try to just take the money and run and see what they can do.
But do you think the young person ought to have the right to, because the whole basis of this argument is if a young person is, they have a marketability of their ability, their athletic ability, and that marketability allows them other opportunities to financially gain. If you go to a model where they just have, everybody goes 2 years, like right now it's everybody goes 1 year in basketball. Everybody has to go 2 years or whatever. Do you think that's fair to that young person who may be LeBron James?
Yeah.
Let's take the extremes, right? LeBron James came out, he was at a time where you could go directly to the NBA. He has, as we can all agree, amazing gifts that I'm not sure that going to, from a basketball perspective, going to college would have helped him. But is it fair to those young people? Is that what, I feel like what I'm hearing you say is we think you ought to have a set time where you need to be going to college if you're committing to go into college.
Yeah, like it's hard for like cases like that with LeBron and like Anthony Davis who come out of high school and they're just phenomenal and you know they're going to be good in the NBA. But I feel like you should still stay 2 years, but they should adopt like the Olympic, like what the Olympics do, where like they don't have a set salary, but they should be able to make money off their name. They should be able to have endorsements, like go on autograph tours, like in the off season, just to make money for themselves. Because if they're bringing in that much money to the school and like to the NCAA, and they should obviously be able to get some of it back.
The Johnny Manziel model.
Yeah.
And if I'm like an NBA head coach, I'd want them to do like at least 1 year, so that it's like what Turner said about Scout. Like, you think everyone was saying he's going to be the next Anthony Davis and all that, but I want to see like how he does against better players and like high school athletes to see like what he's worth to the NBA. And so, like after this year, he's supposed to be the number 1 pick, but obviously he's not now. So.
We'll take 2 angles, kind of get to the same point. You have, Turner mentioned it earlier, just playing for the passion of the game, school pride, etc. Back when the Olympics changed and allowed professional basketball players to play in the Olympics, we had the Dream Team. So the first one was great. I mean, it was neat because it incorporated truly our best players. But I think most of us that are old enough to remember that, just the polish and glamour of the Olympics has diminished now since pro athletes are able to play in that amateur sporting event, you know? And so, would we see